Well, it's finally time to have the conversation about Overwatch 2's PvE that came out, the whole reason for Overwatch 2, and I want to give my honest thoughts on it, but before that, let's get a quick word from today's sponsor, the same one that we had last month, and yeah, you guys should check it out. It's going to help you out. Guys, I have one of the best deals ever on the channel for you all today. So today's reaction video is sponsored by Private Internet Access, and not only are you able to get this VPN with a 30-day money-back guarantee, but with my code, you get 83% off, $2 a month. For using my code, which will be down in the description. Let me tell you about these guys real quick, right? So obviously a VPN service allows you to browse the web much safer. You have encrypted data. You can get past region blocks for content by VPNing to areas that, like, for example, if certain shows are restricted in your area, you can VPN to the area that has them. You can overcome ISP throttling as well if your ISP throttles you, which we're not surprised if that happens, but it's just a safer way to browse the internet. Not only do these guys let you use it on unlimited devices, right? You can use it on any device. It's compatible with anything. They have over 30 million downloads worldwide, and they let you use it anywhere, give you a money-back guarantee, and you can get 83% off for $2 a month using my code down in the description. Guys, this is an unbelievable deal, right? It is an unbelievable deal. This is the best VPN service that I've ever really seen. I mean, there are 50 servers in all 50 states. You can connect to any streaming service. You can connect to personal apps. You can increase your speeds and lower your ping depending on where you are. And look, guys, I'll be real. I've never seen a VPN deal this good. And you guys know what we like to do. Win, win, win. Right? We create a win for you, a win for me, and win for the business. So definitely check these guys out. If you don't like it, again, it's free for 30 days. You can just, say no, but I think you're going to, considering what they offer is so good. So thank you, Private Internet Access, for sponsoring today's video. You're not going to find a better VPN deal, guys. And again, they're trusted by 30 million people across the world. So go check them out. It helped me out. It helped you out. It helped them out. Win, win, win. Thanks for the video. Let's break down other people's perspectives before I get into mine, right? So you'll never really see this again in gaming, right? You had Overwatch 1, which won Game of the Year, right, in 2016, to Overwatch 2, which is now the worst rated game in Steam history on Steam now. And the reason why Overwatch went to Steam is a part of the Microsoft's deal to acquire the company. They want to make sure their games get on other platforms. So, you actually see how users are replying and responding on Steam, where I think over 90% of the ratings were negative, and some of the ones that were positive were just kind of meme comments, right? And generally it hasn't been received well, and it's very obvious when you get into it as to why that is. The gameplay was just incredibly underwhelming. It seems like there was just no effort put into it at all. The storytelling and the cinematics were actually good as always. It's crazy to me, that all the resources that were put into making in the actual game from this game company would have been better off putting it into an anime, oh my God, what's the league? Arcane or something like that. It's just, the cutscenes were interesting, but the gameplay just made everything seem so unintense and uninspiring, and it just didn't feel like a game that was supposed to be a Borderlands 3 or a Spider-Man PS4 or something like that, where, you have this big promise and this massive under-delivery that just was not good. There was very little new content. The objectives were boring and just there for the sake of being there. They very clearly weren't thought about extensively by people who are very into the genre. And some of the stuff was a little buggy on my end too. But we'll talk all about all that. I'm going to go by mission per mission, and we're going to talk about these. So let's talk about mission 1. Mission 1 in Rio de Janeiro. I mean, I'm going to be honest, guys. This mission was copy-paste what I played at BlizzCon in 2019. Now, I know most people didn't get the chance to actually play this mission in 2019, but it'd been 4 years, and there was actually less, because I remember looting, chests and stuff back then. Basically, you go to Rio de Janeiro, you meet up with Lucio. I guess I got to play as Echo, which is a character that wasn't in the game at the time, so I guess you got to play as the new character, but the enemies were just really boring, right? They just kind of stand there and shoot at you, and it's supposed to be, it doesn't, how the gameplay didn't fit with the lore of the story, in that these Omnics are supposed to be, almost as intelligent, if not more intelligent than humans, because the whole argument and underlying rationale and storyline of Overwatch is, the Omnic right. It's a massive, massive issue in the world of Overwatch. And, I find it hard to advocate for Omnic rights when these super advanced Omnics are sitting there like they have 2 IQ, and they're sitting there shooting at you, doing about as much as a pitching machine in baseball would. They weren't engaging at all, to be honest with you. It was pitiful watching these guys, come in. They'd either sit there and fly in, and the designs of them were cool, but the actual augmentation of them was just frankly terrible and lackluster. So you go through Rio de Janeiro, and then you go onto this ship, and then Brigida picks you up in her ship, or Echo, and if you had not picked Echo, and you fly up into this giant mainframe, and you're on board the Null Sector ship, and they're attacking, and you just walk right through the ship, and oh wow, there's some enemies you got to fight that are, again, very lackluster, and you don't really cover too much ground. Like, the amount of map size is pretty much the same as like a standard map. It's not even comparable to that of like a Call of Duty campaign that comes out every year, or something of that sort, which just begs the question, what were they doing over there? I mean, I hope one day the story comes out, but it clearly wasn't a lot. And so you go in the ship, and then finally you fight this big bad rhino boss, Omnic, right? And when I tell you it was probably the lamest boss fight I've ever encountered in my life, I mean it. It's embarrassing, like how just simple the AI is. I mean, you basically have to bait him to charge into the machine, and he kind of just does it. It's not complicated whatsoever. And when he's not charging, he's sitting there shooting you like a bot. Well, he is a bot, I guess, but it's just like not sophisticated whatsoever. Like, there's no interesting attack patterns. It seems like anytime the difficulty was ramped, the game just got harder because they upped the health of enemies, not because like the enemies got more difficult or the damage was increased on the things. Like, it wasn't thought through thoroughly where you really had to make the player think. It just felt corny and gimmicky, right? It didn't feel like, when I'm playing Borderlands 3, which, again, to compare Overwatch 2 to Borderlands 3, you could argue might not be fair towards Overwatch, but that's kind of what was promised. And again, this might be not even the Overwatch, and there's probably Activision executives demanding this. But it's just very sad because, those enemies in Borderlands, like, they make you think, they make you like actually engage. And a couple enemies down the line I'll talk about have that potential for sure, that definitely showed some signs of promise, but not a single one of them in the Rio de Janeiro mission. It was boring, man. And so you kill this bot, and then, he charges into the thing like super easily. It's not challenging like whatsoever. And then you have to leave the ship, and the only thing that was different in that entire mission from 2019 is that the ending cutscene, when you just literally walk in the ship, walk out, you finally see what happens to Lucio, and it turns out Brigida, spoiler alert, just throws her mace straight at Lucio, and he catches it, and then hey, Overwatch is back together, let's all group up and become a big team, and we're back. And it's like, all right, well, that gameplay sucked, but it was a worse version of Archives. And in my opinion, I actually thought the Retribution event from 2018 was the best PvE mission that Overwatch ever did. And it's crazy to me that, like, these missions, these campaigns that we're paying for, which is, these should not be paid for. These should be free. It's for how bad they are, they should be free. It just felt like Retribution was better. And I can't believe I'm saying that, considering they had 4 years to work on just this, right? It's been about 4 years. And it blows my mind. So that mission, I give a solid 2.5. No, honestly, like a 1.5 out of 10. It just wasn't updated at all over 4 years, and it was just lackluster and boring. But number 2, actually, I think we see some signs of life. So let's talk about Toronto, mission number 2. Now, mission number 2, I thought was a little bit better than mission number 1, though that's not saying very much. We get to go to a new area in Toronto, and you meet up with Sojourn, who got a cool little cinematic. And honestly, again, like, the cinematics I thought were really, really good, but I think the storytelling could have been interesting, but the gameplay was so bad and so boring that it took away from the suspense and fear that they can really capture, and they've done a great job of capturing in their cinematics over the years that have been, like, seriously the best in the industry. It just is a shame that the game company can't make gameplay. It's frustrating, right? But so we'll talk about this. And this is where I started to get very, very frustrated. But I'm going to rate this one higher than the previous one, just because it was new, and it wasn't the same recycled stuff, though. We'll get into recycling here in a minute. So you start out in this area, and a ship comes up, and they're trying to get people who were stuck or refugees out of this giant arena that you can't even go in from these Omnics that are attacking, right? And the Omnics are basically like, Null Sector is basically putting on these helmets that overwrites someone's consciousness of the Omnics, whatever. It's supposed to be big and scary. In the cinematics, it kind of was, I guess, but in the gameplay, it just wasn't. And so the objective is just really boring and dumb. You're sitting there shooting enemies, and it's fun for maybe like 30 seconds, but then, you know, the elevator comes down and a bunch of people run on the ship, and then the ship closes, and then more Omnics attack, and then you shoot more Omnics in the same place, and you see these little attack dog enemies come out, and you think, oh, cool, new enemies. We didn't see those in the first mission. And then you realize, wait a minute, these are the same ones that were in the game in 2017 in the old Uprising events on King's Row. They're the exact same enemies recycled with literally nothing noticeably new on them. And they don't even attack you. They just run up to the ship and they just beam the ship. It's super one-dimensional, not engaging content whatsoever. So you're sitting there shooting half these bots that won't even shoot back at you. And then there's other enemies crawling off the roofs, which I thought was kind of interesting, but they're just, the AIs were just terrible. Like, you're making this PvE games for years, and I guess they spent too much time on skill trees for heroes, and it's like these enemies just suck. They just suck. They're not interesting whatsoever. And so, you know, you're just sitting there, and eventually you clear all the waves, and the elevator keeps opening, and more people come out, and then you watch them run out, and you're just standing there, and it's just like the objectives are just horrible. They're just so bad, not engaging whatsoever, right? It would have been cool if they had spawned in, you know, hundreds of bots, and been like, eliminate 100 bots, and people will go off on their own. It wasn't choreographed well, and it wasn't fun to really do. But then finally you move on to a new area, and then it starts to get better, right? So you move on through these areas, and then finally you see a new enemy, the Stalkers, which I think have potential, but I was playing on hard difficulty, and this was my first encounter with one right here. I'll play it on screen.
What was that? Stalker. I fought a few of them since this started.
Wait,
they use
what?
gravity beams to pull people in.
Oh, a new enemy!
Kill 'em
A new
fast
enemy!
enough, and we
Let's
don't have to
go!
find out.
Yeah, I mean, it just gets clobbered, right? It just gets absolutely clobbered. And again, you know, you could say maybe, oh, Samito, you were a former pro player, top 500, but you know what? When I'm playing hard mode on Borderlands, through Borderlands for the first time, we don't clobber enemies like that. Like, the way that weapons and damage scale have been thought about extensively, and they do such a great job. And again, I'm comparing it to a top tier, you know, Gearbox. Say what you want about Gearbox, right? But, you know, generally speaking, that's never been people's issue with Borderlands games, right? You know, you could argue the writing of Borderlands 3, whatever you want to say, sure. But, you know, gameplay wise, it's always been great. And it's not even close. It's not even close. So the Stalkers had some potential, but their AI was also very simplistic, but it was better, right? It was better, but like, compared to what? It was just not great. So you go and rescue this Omnic named Claire, who, you know, you have to escort her through the city. And like, that was like my big issue with these missions. Again, you'll see more of these objectives just being stupid, in my opinion. So yeah, you go on, you rescue Claire, and then you're going through the subway station after taking out the Stalker, and then you see one of these mind bots or whatever that attacks that almost hairnet, whatever you want to call it, to the Omnics, and it overwrites their consciousness, and it's supposed to be scary, but I didn't find it scary at all. I really didn't. I really didn't. So, you know, you then have to protect this girl this Omnic girl from these bots that are trying to attack her, and she's just standing in a corner, like hiding, like, help me, and you just have to defend her, and then you're in another room doing the exact same objective that you did at the very start, except this time all the bots are going after like this girl that's hiding in the corner. And I'm like, you know, these are just very unimpressive, uninspiring objectives, right? It's just like the concept from the ground up was just not good. Like, it's, you know, you felt like you had this dead weight around, and these objectives were there for the sake of cheap and easy things for you to do in the game, and it didn't actually make sense to like what was happening in the greater world, and it certainly wasn't the best thing for a gameplay perspective either, which just seems to be the big miss, was the gameplay throughout this thing. So then after you clear all these things that are trying to attack her. And I will say that fight got a little bit more interesting because the stalkers came in with these new enemies, and there was definitely some potential there to build off and make the game better. But it was still missing something. It was definitely missing a lot. Like Null Sector are just a bunch of schmucks. I actually thought the Talon enemies they made in 2018 were more impressive and more fun to play against, like the assassins. Like that was, and that's crazy to say. That's crazy to say. That the enemies 5 years ago were more engaging than the ones in this game. It's sad, but you know, it is what it is. So yeah, you clear this out, and then you meet this lawyer who was hiding in a corner named Reggie. He was an Omnic, and Claire was like, "Oh, of course you survived. You hide, you ratty lawyer." And the lawyer gets his snarky remarks, and there was a bit of comedic relief, which was fine, right? And so then this is where it really started to irritate me. Then you move on and you're escorting these two Omnics. Like there's this massive invasion going on. And I guess, you know, your main thing is to, you know, help these two Omnics get out. And you know what? I can't help but think from a writing perspective, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, maybe I know saving lives is important and stuff, but you know, when you're telling a video game story, right, and Overwatch, there's supposed to be this massive thing of Null Sector going on. They're literally invading many cities, and the most important thing that we can come up with for the Overwatch agents to do is to just escort Omnics throughout the city that don't do anything, that sit there and are meaningless. Like, what about infiltrate? I guess there was an infiltration mission on the previous one where you're fighting Omnics and those things. You know, that might be me being picky. You know, that might be me. That might just be me being picky. And I think maybe if the gameplay was a bit more engaging, I wouldn't be mad about that. But it kind of comes into the Cyberpunk problem that I had, and this is strictly my opinion. This is not anything else. So this is not like objective truth. This is my opinion. Like my big gripe with Cyberpunk was I really wish that they'd focus more on the Corpo Wars, right? Because that's the whole thing about Cyberpunk in that game. If you played it, it was, you know, the story was okay. It was all right, but I thought like the idea between the big wars between the corporations and working through them and like going in through like all this, you know, almost governmental like spy stuff, like corporate espionage, I thought that would have been an awesome subject matter to focus on, considering the big theme of it was the big corporations and the Corpo Wars, right? And the same thing for Borderlands. You kind of saw that with vault hunting, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I personally would have liked to see different storylines be told. But they weren't terrible. I think it was more so how they were implemented that it could have been bad. But that's just, again, that's just my opinion. I could be totally off base, but yeah. And so then you move on with these people, and then they're sitting in corners, right? And they're like, "Oh, we're being attacked. They're attacking us in this next room." And it's just more of the same stuff where you're just camping in a room shooting bots. And these two, instead of like backing off, the two hostages go and hide like up front in corners, and they're very clearly there just to be there for an objective, right? It's like, okay, you're telling me that these people are being attacked, these Omnics that are supposed to be super sophisticated in the future, human soul level intelligent, and they just go sit in a corner? And, you know, I know some pretty unintelligent people out there right now, right? I mean, sure, we all do. I'm pretty sure that if there was a massive war going on, that they wouldn't sit in a corner right in front of all of the enemies dropping in, shooting, and just be in the line of fire. No, those people are running. That's fight or flight, basic humanity, and they just sit there in the corners, and I'm watching this, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, you know, like run back the way we came and hide. We just cleared that area out, but like, again, they're there for the sake of being there for an objective, right? And it just wasn't thought through at all, in my opinion. Like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And now, then the PvP mechanics there were, or the PvE mechanics there were, they were all right. I mean, there were some stalkers coming in, which were the only enemies I really found to be remotely engaging, and they weren't that engaging, to be honest with you. It was pretty boring. And, you know, you clear all these enemies out, and then, oh, yay, if they didn't kill the Omnics in time, that Reggie and Claire, and then you can move on. And it's like, all right, you know, another kill room, okay, nothing, and the combat wasn't that engaging, so, you know, we move on, and then you end up clearing a bunch of enemies in a park as you escort these people to the ship, and then you get on the ship. And it's like, okay, we learned nothing about Null Sector. I guess Ramatra came on and was speaking. We had nothing hands-on about what they were doing and what they were trying to do. We just know they're attacking Omnics, and we've been waiting 4 years for this to come out, and after we played the first mission, and we have still learned nothing. I guess Ramatra had come out and stuff, and that's kind of cool, but it's like, okay, like we just sat there shooting bots. Like, we've been doing this in the archives events for 4 years, 5 years. Like, what is new here? And it was just a couple new enemies. Like, it literally, you know, was, to me, I rate this mission about like a 2.5 out of 10. It just, It's not replayable. It's not interesting. Like the missions the objectives were just stupid and forced for no reason, and it wasn't engaging. But going through the maps were cool, I guess, and you got glimpses of the story, and the cutscenes were okay. Like I didn't mind the cutscenes. Like that's all they really needed to be were just 2-minute cutscenes, and you could have figured out everything that you needed to, and it probably would have been just as engaging. It's just the disconnect between the storytelling and the gameplay for Overwatch. It's been a common theme for many years. So Mission 2 was just not it. And now we're on to Mission 3, which was just, from a game design perspective, just terrible. I'll be honest. So you go to Sweden, and you'll understand why. And this might have been because I got stuck on Brigitte. But, to top it off, you go and you learn, you take this Omnic that has this thing put on its head that Reinhardt and Torbjorn have discovered, like, has kind of overridden their memory bank. So the Omnics don't have a soul anymore, right? Or whatever the storyline is. And then it has a tracking device in it, and then it brings Null Sector to Sweden, where, you are Reinhardt, Torbjorn, Brigitte, and there's one more. Bastion. And Bastion's there too, right? So, yeah, and they attack, and then, this giant, massive robot lands in. This should be this massive threat, right? So what you end up doing is you have to escort a payload that goes at a snail's pace down this lane to set up these magma cores for Torbjorn's giant turrets to shoot at it. So while this payload is moving at a snail's pace, just a horrible objective idea, right? I'm playing Brig, and I'm just sitting on this payload, right? I'm just like, all right, this is so boring. Like, I'm just standing here, and I find Brig to not be that engaging of a character. Like, I played her in contenders, like in professional play, and, I get it. It's, maybe if I was playing Bastion or Torb or shooting something, that would have been more fun, but I'm anchoring my team, and I'm like, this is just a stupid objective to slowly push a payload around, like, 3 objectives to set up these turrets. And now, you do meet a new enemy called like a vulture, and it shoots down like this EMP bomb that if you're in the radius, EMP like hacks you. And that was kind of intriguing, I guess. Like there was potential with that enemy for sure, but the way that they just came out, it wasn't threatening or that much fun, to be honest with you. Like I just didn't find it to be that engaging. So then you set up the core, areas open, and bots are flying in, and this giant bot is just kind of standing there, and every once in a while he'll shoot artillery at you that you have to dodge, and it's just, it's like this massive robot, and it's supposed to be a threat, and you barely, like, its attacks weren't that engaging. It was super easy to dodge, and yeah, they did some damage, but that's not that engaging of a PvE mechanic for me. Like, if you look at some of the bosses in Borderlands, like, you're constantly moving. You're constantly having to dodge. Like, you're constantly having to think and be proactive about everything that you're doing, and that's what makes the game so masterful. The same for Spider-Man, right? A lot of the Spider-Man fights, and that's what makes these PvE games so good. And usually Blizzard's really good with those things, but it's just like, I don't know what they were doing with this. It just was awful. So you go to the next section, and then the robot shoots more artillery at you. You put it down. The vultures, like, it missed a couple of its attacks on me. And then you set up the third one, and you're done. And it turns out you've gone in this small little circle around Torbjorn's thing. And then, oh, wait, the other turrets didn't do enough damage to this massive robot that's kind of shooting at this town. Let's set up the mega cannon and defend it inside. And so you've just gone in a circle, and then you go right back to where you started. And then the enemies start invading from one of 3 sides at a time. And then finally at the end, they invade. And it's like, this is just going at a snail's pace. You've had to slowly push this payload around. It's not engaging at all. And now, like, you're going through baby steps, setting up freeze turrets. And you see these new enemies, these bombers that have these legs and they have this bomb inside, right? These things wouldn't beat a grandma wheeling her groceries across the street. They were slow. They were boring. I was so disappointed at the AI of these enemies. Like, they weren't impressive whatsoever, right? And it was at the point where I was just standing there as Brig, like 360 no-scoping them, trying to flail them into the lava core. And it's just, the objectives were just boring. The enemies just weren't engaging. And finally, after they're done doing their big invasion, you get like enough charge on the big turret to shoot down this massive robot that supposedly is able to destroy cities that barely attacked you, and let you just build this massive turret to shoot it down, and then it crumbles and it's dead. And it's like, that's it. Not to mention, when I was playing Brig, the hitboxes were broken in the area too, where I couldn't use my shield bash or my mace on the main area you had to defend on the turret. For whatever reason, it counted it as an invisible hitbox. So my shield bash didn't work and my mace flail didn't work. So that on top of that, it was buggy. And it just seems like they had some dev, some like intern working on this for fun for a couple years. And we're just like, oh, we'll put it out and charge $15 for it. It was terrible. I give it a solid like 2 out of 10. So like overall, I rate these missions a 2 out of 10. It was just nowhere near what was promised. And to be frank, what's even crazier is that it actually was worse than the archives events from 2017 and 2018. I can't believe they fumbled this bad. And now, again, some of the new heroes that are coming out, like this is just more so talking about Overwatch 2. Like the remnants of Overwatch 1, you know, will still go on strong. And I hope that it succeeds. It's very clear why they swapped and adapted to PvP instead of PvE. It's because they very clearly weren't capable of doing PvE, whether it's because they didn't have the right personnel or they didn't have the resources from ABK. Frankly, it doesn't really matter. It's very sad that they're even charging people for this. And it's just, it disappoints me. I think that, honestly, if it was Aaron Keller's choice, I probably think he's the kind of guy who'd be like, yeah, we shouldn't charge for this. Like, this is trash. It's like, it literally is a complete failure. It was the worst campaign I've ever played. But aside from that, the actual cinematics and the storytelling were good, as always. Like, Overwatch has never had that problem where they're not good at telling a story. They're bad at executing it in-game, which is crazy to say from a game design company, a company that's about putting out video games. I couldn't believe it, man. It was underwhelming. It was terrible. The mission objectives were awful, buggy, and just sad, man. Just sad. Just a complete and utter failure, which happens. And that's why they're focusing more on PvE, and hopefully they can focus on getting more archives-like missions out, you know, to people. And it's just, oh, man, nowhere close to a Borderlands game. Not even in the same stratosphere. Like it's I can't even begin to tell you. Like I don't know, guys. Like I think the Zombies Workshop mode had more depth to it than what they actually released. I couldn't believe it. So yeah, it's not worth buying. You should demand them make them free. They should be free. They shouldn't charge for any missions down the line. If those missions end up being like that, and it's just sad. And, you know, I wish the team the best. I don't want to see the game fail. I've always wanted to see the game succeed because I love this game. And, you know, as frustrating as the community can get sometimes, I don't want to be the kind of guy who bets on people to lose. I'm not going to sit here and celebrate and be like, see, I told you, you know, they couldn't do it. And it's like, nah, dude, all I ever wanted to see was the game succeed and the people succeed and the community succeed and my friends succeed. And for this to be what it is, it's the single biggest letdown in gaming history, I think. I can't think of a game that went from Game of the Year to the worst rated release on Steam ever. And I know some people out there are saying that the reason why people don't like the game is because the content creators have created this negative narrative about the game. And that's just delusional, right? Like, you know, myself included, many other people were very optimistic and excited about Overwatch 2, especially in the Overwatch scene. The people who were skeptical were the greater people outside, and they were right and we were wrong. We were blatantly misled. And my guess is that was the executives at ABK. I don't think that Aaron or any of those guys would do that. They seem like pretty chill dudes. So, you know, it's just, it's terrible. It's really funny that they can just, people would say that it's creators' fault when they just under-delivered at absolutely everything. But they did deliver on the shop. That's what they did deliver on. They made better, more modern monetization models. Didn't even give creators creator codes, by the way, which I find hilarious. I find that so funny. It's just so funny to me, and it's just sad. So yeah, guys, this deserved every bad review it got on Steam. They've changed course and they're focusing on PvP with the new hero. Actually, you know, I'm going to talk about this on SVB's podcast on Friday. But this is the first support they've added to the game since 2016 that doesn't have either AoE healing or immortality on the kit. Think about that for a second. The first one since 2016. And I don't really count Ana. I know she has her nade, but like that's not, I don't consider her kit to be an AoE healing kit because of the nade. Like the others. So yeah, they've, I think whoever made the new support is doing well, and I hope they succeed in the PvP space. But man, don't buy the PvE, guys. It's the biggest disappointment I've ever seen. And as a huge Borderlands fan, if you guys have not played the Borderlands series or Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, I highly suggest you go do so if you're looking for your fill on PvE. Really just masterful games that will definitely deliver on the experience that Overwatch 2 promised and ultimately failed at. So yeah, hopefully the storytelling for Overwatch can stay interesting. You know, I hope the team, I wish them success, and you know, Aaron's a great guy. I hope it works out for him and everybody else over there with the Microsoft acquisition, and just a real disappointment. So yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Much love to everybody at home. Unlucky. It happens in life. So see y'all later. Peace out.